A minute ago, Jamie Raskin said a name, and Kash Patel's world turned upside down. Charlie Kirk, the young activist who was assassinated in Utah with cold-bloodedness. That brutal murder that shook the entire country. And Raskin revealed live where Patel was that night, the critical night when the killer was still at large, and what he was doing. You should have seen the expression on Patel's face. He was shocked. He never imagined that such an event would come up and cause him trouble. And Raskin mercilessly, without hesitation, without showing mercy, continued to shoot. You absolutely must watch this video to the end because the details Raskin reveals, what happened that night, where Patel was, what misinformation he spread, are incredible. If you're new to this channel, subscribe right away and hit the bell icon. This event is developing every second. House Oversight Committee. Today, live on air. The atmosphere in the room was tense as Raskin began his opening remarks. But no one, including Patel, could predict what was to come. Director Patel, you and I haven't had the opportunity to meet before, Raskin said, keeping his voice low. And unfortunately, you haven't responded to the 8 audit letters I've sent you in the last 7 months. 8 letters, 7 months. 0 response. Therefore, we have a lot of questions for you. Patel tried to look relaxed. He leaned back slightly in his chair. He looked at his lawyers. His usual lawyers were lined up behind him. Everything seemed under control. But actually, it wasn't. Raskin first praised Patel. It was an unexpected move. The first director of the FBI was J. Edgar Hoover, someone who stubbornly refuses to hire women, African Americans, and other minorities as agents. Despite living with Clyde Tolson for decades as a closeted homosexual, he participated in anti-gay campaigns. Today, he aggressively promoted what we would call white Christian nationalism. He paused. Hoover would be turning in his grave if he saw a first-generation Indian American and a proud Hindu as one of his successors. In this sense, I congratulate you. You are a product of the civil rights movement opening up the FBI and the federal workforce. Patel smiled slightly. He had received a compliment. He relaxed. He relaxed too early. Unfortunately, Raskin said, his voice suddenly hardening, you share Hoover's dangerous obsession. An obsession with blind loyalty instead of professionalism and effective public policy. For Hoover, this is blind loyalty to him in order to protect his own secrets. For you, blind loyalty to keep someone else's secrets. The salon fell silent. Patel's smile suddenly faded. Throughout your approval process, assessments from all sectors said the following. Your primary distinguishing feature was your unwavering loyalty. Unlike the other directors, you didn't have a single day of work experience at the FBI. In return, you appeared on over 1,000 media and political programs. Raskin pulled a page from the file in front of him. Your confirmation vote in the Senate resulted in 51 to 49, one of the closest votes in history. Opponents have described you as unqualified and someone who is not interested in improving the requirements of the position. I had hoped they were mistaken. He paused for a moment. Unfortunately, they weren't wrong. And then Raskin came to Charlie Kirk. When Charlie Kirk was cold-bloodedly assassinated in that brutal murder that shook the entire nation, and the killer was still at large, you decided you didn't need to be at FBI headquarters in Washington and work with your team. Patel's face began to change. He wasn't expecting this. While the chaotic manhunt was underway, you spent your evening dining at a chic restaurant in the heart of Manhattan. The salon roared. The journalists looked at each other. This was new information, at least expressed so clearly. And that night, Raskin continued, you tweeted misinformation. You said, the suspect in the shooting incident is in custody. He picked up a piece of paper. You had to retract this statement an hour later, because the suspect was not in custody. He was still free. He was still outside. And you, the FBI director, were spreading misinformation while having dinner in Manhattan. Before we continue, just one thing. If you've watched this far, please like the video. This signal makes a difference in the algorithm and is important for this recording to reach more people. Also note in the comments, why wasn't Patel in Washington that night? Why was he eating at a restaurant? Raskin didn't stop. Your performance was so disturbing that even your own base was alarmed. He said a name, Christopher Rufo, culture warrior Christopher Rufo, the man who was sitting in your seat as a Republican witness just a few months ago. Do you know what he said? Raskin read a paper. He performed terribly, and he wanted you to be removed from your position. Your own fans, Director Patel, your own fans told you should be fired. Patel's jaw tightened. His hands gripped the edge of the table. He looked at his lawyers, but they looked surprised too. They weren't prepared for the severity of this attack. And the day before, Raskin continued, you displayed an explosive and volatile anger at the Senate trial. The whole country watched. And he asked, is this man suitable to lead the FBI? Here's where Raskin dropped the real bombshell. But more importantly, he said, lowering his voice, this was a bad sign. Raskin delivered his heaviest blows when he lowered his voice. Do you know what you did just weeks before the Charlie Kirk assassination? Patel didn't respond. He waited. You fired the leader of the Salt Lake City field office, Mehta Abbas, an experienced counterterrorism expert. Colleagues described him as absolutely the best and legendary. Raskin hesitated. He was calculating the impact. If he hadn't been fired, he would have led the FBI's manhunt after the Charlie Kirk assassination attempt. That experienced, that expert, that legendary woman, you fired her. And weeks later, an assassination occurred in Utah, in his district. He looked at the salon. And where were you that night? In Washington? At FBI headquarters? No, at a restaurant in Manhattan. You were tweeting the wrong thing. Patel tried to go on the defensive, but her voice was trembling. Representative Raskin, I want to be transparent about the Charlie Kirk assassination. The timeline is important. He took a breath. Unfortunately, Charlie Kirk was assassinated in September. The very next day, early in the morning Utah time, we immediately shared the assassin's images with the public. We made the people partners in the hunt for Adam. He continued. I arrived at the scene around 5 p.m. I examined the crime scene myself. We flew in a large number of FBI personnel to process the DNA. We brought in evidence technicians, hostage rescue teams, and other specialists. At 8 p.m., we released the suspect's video at a press conference. We also shared improved images. And at 10 p.m., less than 2 hours after the video was streamed, the suspect was apprehended and taken into custody. He looked at the salon. The suspect was in custody for 33 hours. 33 hours. And his family specifically told FBI interrogators. They recognized their sons thanks to the video and photos released under my orders. When their son stopped by the house, they confronted him, and this led to his capture. Raskin listened. He listened patiently. Then he spoke. 33 hours. That's an impressive number, but I have a few questions. He leaned forward. You said you arrived at the scene at 5 p.m. So, where were you before 5 p.m.? Where were you when you heard the news of the assassination? Patel hesitated. I was in New York at the time. Were you in New York? Is this about an FBI matter? Silence. No, I had a special program. A special program. Raskin shook his head. When Charlie Kirk was shot and the killer was still at large, you were in New York for a special program. And in the evening, you ate at a chic restaurant in Manhattan. Raskin has now reached the most difficult point. Director Patel, you are not running the FBI as a law enforcement agency, not as an institution tasked with keeping the American people safe, but as an agency of political enforcement. Patel's face turned red. I reject this characterization. In 7 months, Raskin interrupted, it's impossible to overstate the destruction, chaos, and demoralization you brought to the FBI and the workforce, and the resulting danger you pose to our country. He took a piece of paper. You are systematically eliminating the FBI's most experienced and qualified agents, section leaders and experts in counterterrorism, counterintelligence, and cybersecurity, precisely the kind of people you don't have and the FBI needs, are being purged from the Bureau's ranks. He looked at Patel. You illegally fired Brian Driscoll, former acting director of the office. He is an award-winning counterterrorism expert who worked for the FBI for approximately 20 years. He paused. And do you know what you told Driscoll? According to Driscoll's statement, you told him, Raskin read a paper, my job depends on the removal of agents working on cases against the president. It doesn't matter whether these agents chose to work on those cases or not. And you added, the FBI director tried to put me in jail. He didn't forget this. The atmosphere in the room suddenly changed. Patel tried to answer. This characterization is wrong. That's Driscoll's statement. Raskin cut him off. Sworn statement. Are you lying, or is he? Patel fell silent completely. Raskin continued. You repeatedly forced senior leadership to take polygraph tests to prove their political loyalty. You fired the leaders who rejected these demeaning practices. You created a freelance butler gang in your office and tasked them with conducting unauthorized investigations targeting and harassing career FBI employees. He stood up. And now we see a very clear reason why you want to build a political FBI. Epstein files. And that's where everything came together. You want an FBI that is blindly loyal to you, Raskin said, so you can continue to cover up a massive international sex trafficking ring with over 1,000 victims, betraying all survivors of sexual violence. Patel's face turned white as a sheet. Before taking on this role, you called for the full release of the Epstein files. You told podcaster Benny Johnson, and I quote, the only reason the list isn't being published is because of who's on that list. Raskin hesitated. You promised during your approval process, there will be no cover-up. There will be no lost documents. Every stone will be turned over. Anyone who sabotages this will be swiftly pursued. And what did you do this spring? Raskin's voice rose. You assigned hundreds of agents to scan all of Epstein's files, but not to look for more clues about money laundering or human trafficking networks. He paused. You pulled these agents from their normal counterterrorism or drug trafficking duties. You made them work day and night, sleeping at their desks. For what? To ensure that specific names and images are marked and blurred wherever they appear, in an email, a message, a letter, an interview, a photo, or a video. Patel gathered himself one last time and went on the defensive. Representative Raskin, the main mistake in the Epstein case was not made during my tenure. This process took shape between 2006 and 2008, during Acosta's tenure. At that time, search warrants were also extremely limited. The scope of the investigation had been narrowed. The periods examined were fragmented and limited. He took a short breath. Acosta paved the way for an agreement with Epstein that effectively granted him weekend punishment, despite allegations of kidnapping underage girls. He was even allowed to go home on weekends. Moreover, as part of this agreement, a non-prosecution clause was signed that would prevent future investigations. We knocked on the door of the judiciary. We requested the removal of these agreements and file seals. We were rejected 3 times. Congress can reiterate the same demand and be part of this struggle. Raskin listened. Then he spoke. You're blaming others. You're blaming 2006. You're blaming Acosta. But you've been in office for 7 months. And what did you announce in July? You and Attorney General Bondi? Silence. No further explanation will be appropriate or necessary. That was your official statement. Raskin shook his head. How did you go from being a crusader for accountability and transparency regarding the Epstein files to becoming part of the conspiracy and cover-up in just a few short months? The answer is simple. You said it yourself. Because of who's on the list. The hearing continued after that. Patel listed the statistics. 23,000 violent criminals were arrested, 6,000 weapons were collected, 4,700 child victims were found, and 33,000 pages of documents were submitted. But no one was listening. Everyone had the same question on their minds. Where was Patel when Charlie Kirk was shot? At a restaurant in Manhattan. He was tweeting the wrong thing. And he had fired the legendary expert who could manage the hunt in Utah, Mehta Abbas, weeks ago. Within minutes, the clip spread every place. The Manhattan restaurant trend has entered the global spotlight. He retracted it after 1 hour, went viral, and everyone was asking the same question. Why wasn't the FBI director in Washington during an assassination investigation? Why did he spread misinformation? And why had he fired the experienced experts? Christopher Rufo's words were shared repeatedly. Terrible performance. He should be fired. His own fans. Their own fans were saying this. Let's think about what this means. First, Patel was dining in Manhattan on a critical night, while the killer is free, while Adam is hunting. Second, he tweeted false information and had to retract it an hour later. The FBI director is spreading misinformation. Thirdly, Meta had fired Abbas, the legendary expert from the Utah region, weeks before the assassination. If he hadn't been expelled, the man would have managed the hunt. Fourth, he did not respond to 8 audit letters in 7 months. 8 letters, 0 response. And fifth, what he said to Driscoll. The FBI director tried to put me in jail. He hasn't forgotten that. Is still on the record. 1 minute. This was all it took for Jamie Raskin to completely corner Patel through Charlie Kirk. Manhattan restaurant, wrong tweet, fired expert, and the terrible performance assessment from their own fans. Patel sat there, drenched in sweat, pale, defenseless. He listed his numbers. He repeated his statistics. But those numbers didn't change where he was in Manhattan that night. It didn't change the fact that he had to retract the tweet. And Raskin knew this. Salon knew this. And now all of America knows. If you want to follow this story, subscribe now and click the bell icon. All developments will be here. And share this video. Everyone should know that Manhattan restaurant detail. And now, watch the 2 videos you see on the screen. Both are critical to fully understanding today's Charlie Kirk scandal. Click now.